I signed the papers while Julian made pancakes. He kissed my cheek and told me I was saving us from taxes. The same morning he'd booked a honeymoon suite with another woman. And 2 weeks later she was wearing my robe. Camille had always believed love was about choosing someone every day. Julian made her believe that with his lazy Sunday coffee kisses and forehead taps before business trips. He was charming in a quiet, methodical way, his eyes never raised, his voice always warm. He could lie with a smile and make you feel lucky to believe it. So when he sat her down one night and talked about protecting their assets from a potential lawsuit tied to one of his real estate ventures, Camille barely hesitated. He trusted him. He slid the papers across the table like a magician offering an innocent card trick. He used words like temporary, just on paper, and purely strategic. Camille thought if it helped their finances, what was the harm? She never expected that signature to be the scalpel that sliced her marriage in half. Julian made French toast the next morning. He even told her to sleep in, saying she deserved rest after being such a trooper. Camille laughed, still groggy from wine the night before. He kissed her hand like a gentleman. Then he left for a conference, texting her heart emojis and promising to bring home something nice. He brought home Gigi. But Camille didn't know that yet. She went about her days as usual, teaching art therapy at the local children's center, FaceTiming Julian each evening, helping her sister plan a baby shower. She noticed a few odd things: a missing necklace, a scent that wasn't hers on a pillow, a heel mark in the closet that didn't match her shoes, but she brushed them off. She didn't want to become paranoid. Julian always said trust was their foundation. 3 weeks later, Camille returned home a day early from a gallery workshop. The flight had been delayed and her phone battery had died, so she took a cab instead of calling Julian. She was exhausted, dragging her suitcase to the front door and thinking only of her bathtub. The door was unlocked. She walked inside and froze. The faint scent of vanilla lotion, not hers, lingered in the air. Jazz music played softly. There was a wine glass on the counter, lipstick stained. The sound of a shower echoed from upstairs. And then she saw it. A white silk robe. Her robe. Worn by a tall, elegant brunette descending the stairs, wet hair in a towel. They both stared at each other. The woman smirked. "Hi," the woman said casually. "You must be Camille." Camille blinked. The woman walked past her like she belonged there. "I'm Gigi. Jules told me you'd moved out weeks ago." The words hit like bricks. Camille didn't even speak. Her throat locked. "Jules? Moved out?" Gigi tossed her a smile before stepping into the kitchen, casually opening Camille's fridge. Camille dropped her suitcase and ran upstairs. The photos were gone from the bedroom wall. Her clothes were packed into boxes. Her drawers were empty except for a single note on the nightstand. "We can talk when you're ready. This doesn't change everything. Be kind." She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her own handwriting from the temporary divorce forms. Julian had lied. There was nothing temporary about it. He'd filed them properly. The house was in his name. Their joint savings had been drained. Her name had been removed from their business accounts. Camille wasn't just divorced, she'd been erased. For a week she couldn't eat. Her sister, Nora, brought her food, tissues, and a baseball bat with no explanation. Camille didn't cry much. She just kept whispering, "I didn't see it. I didn't see it." She replayed every moment with Julian. Every weekend brunch. Every "I love you." Every forehead kiss that now felt like a knife twist. And somewhere between heartbreak and humiliation, something inside Camille cracked. Or maybe awakened. It began when she got an email congratulating her on being awarded an anonymous grant from an art foundation. The email thanked her for applying with a portfolio she hadn't submitted. At first she thought it was a mistake. Then she saw the IP address used to log the application. It was the same one from Julian's company office. Her name had been used to launder a large sum, disguised as an award filed under a foundation linked to Julian's shell companies. That's when the fog lifted. It hadn't been just about love. Julian had planned her removal like a corporate merger. Camille, the trusting wife, had signed her own exit paperwork while Julian used her name to juggle taxes, hide assets, and please his mistress with designer bags and 5-star stays. She wasn't just hurt. She was exploited. Camille didn't scream. She didn't confront him. Not yet. She opened a new email account. He started researching. Not rage scrolling but forensic reading. LLC structures. Tax evasion trails. Ownership loopholes. She began collecting evidence. Quietly. Precisely. She enrolled in an online course in business finance under a different name. By day she helped children paint their trauma into sunrises. By night she studied how men like Julian thought they'd never be caught because women like her weren't supposed to be clever after heartbreak. She stopped wearing pastels. Her smile became smaller but sharper. She started running at 5 a.m. She stopped answering Julian's texts. He called her once, acting confused, saying, "Why are you being weird?" She said nothing and hung up. He didn't call back. She imagined he thought she was broken, lost, maybe even grateful to be out of his life. She wanted him to think that. Because she wasn't finished watching. Camille had always believed love meant choosing someone every day. But she'd learned something better. You could choose yourself. And once you did, you stopped bleeding for people who handed you knives. Camille wasn't going to cry anymore. She was going to sharpen her own. And this time, when she signed something, it would be Julian's downfall. Camille stopped living like a ghost. The morning fog in her mind had lifted, and in its place was something fierce, quiet, and disciplined. She didn't tell anyone what she was planning. Even Nora, her closest confidant, only knew that Camille was working on herself, which was technically true. Camille had no interest in public screaming matches, no appetite for messy confrontations or revenge dramas. No, what she wanted was precision. The kind of revenge that wasn't loud. It was legal. Irrefutable. Documented. She wanted him to look in the mirror and see her fingerprints on every crack. That was going to take patience. And Camille had more of it than anyone knew. Her first step was subtle. She paid a visit to a quiet accountant named Mr. Leston, who specialized in forensic financial analysis for artists and nonprofits. She told him she was trying to reclaim stolen grant money. He didn't ask many questions, just looked at the paperwork and raised one brow. Within 3 days he confirmed what she suspected. Julian had created 3 LLCs in states she'd never stepped foot in, all tied loosely to her name, one even listing her as a silent partner. One LLC had funneled money from an international wire transfer that Camille later found originated from a vacation rental sale in Portugal, a property Julian once bragged about flipping for triple value. She never saw a cent. She let that rage settle. Rage, she had learned, wasn't something to act on. It was something to refine. Like a sculptor chiseling through marble, she used it to carve herself back into someone solid. Her next move came unexpectedly. Julian posted a picture online. It was a soft-lit dinner, roses and wine, tagged with Gigi's username and the caption, "Worth every risk." Camille stared at it and smiled. The location was an upscale restaurant called Salt and Fern, a place she knew well. More importantly, a place with a waiter she had once helped get through a mental health crisis with art therapy. She sent him a simple message. "I'd love to know what wine Julian's drinking these days." A day later she had a receipt with his card info, the name of his dinner guest, and confirmation that Julian tipped poorly. That made her laugh harder than she expected. She started drawing again quietly. Not for therapy but for focus. With each line she sketched, she imagined stripping another asset from Julian. She learned where he was vulnerable. One of his company's high-span rentals had just bought land for a development project. But the zoning permits were still pending, and Camille discovered that the company hadn't paid property taxes in months. She filed an anonymous complaint with the state and triggered an automatic hold on the permits. Suddenly, Julian's big development was in limbo. She waited. It took 2 weeks before he posted another photo, this one of him in a gym, captioned with, "New stress, same grind." The cracks were forming. Then she targeted Gigi not out of spite, but because Gigi was Julian's blind spot. Gigi liked expensive things but didn't understand how paper trails worked. Camille learned that the condo Gigi bragged about on social media had been purchased through one of Julian's shell corporations, technically untraceable unless you knew where to look. Camille knew. She contacted a property insurance firm posing as someone preparing to make an offer on the unit. With a few innocent questions, she confirmed that Julian had listed the property under a name that matched one of his foreign LLCs. That was fraud. Camille contacted a tax specialist who agreed to pass it along to the state under their whistleblower policy. There was a reward. Camille didn't want the money. She wanted the headline. But she knew better than to be hasty. One morning, Julian texted her out of nowhere. "Are you doing okay? We should talk soon. I hate how things turned out." Camille stared at the message. It was so classically Julian, vague, manipulative, and drenched in false warmth. She didn't respond. But she printed the message. It might be useful later. That same week, she went to her storage unit and pulled out an old USB drive Julian once used for real estate backups. She wasn't expecting it to still work. But it did. It contained scanned copies of several contracts he'd had her sign over the years, some clearly forged with timestamps that placed her in other cities during the supposed signing. That was her smoking gun. Camille contacted a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but the kind who loved high-profile settlements. She didn't say much in the meeting. Just laid out the evidence. The lawyer's eyes lit up like it was Christmas. "You understand what you're sitting on?" he asked. Camille nodded. "I'm not interested in jail time. I want leverage." He understood. Together they built a quiet case, never alerting Julian. Every move Camille made was wrapped in legality and disguised as silence. While Camille planned, Julian unraveled. Gigi was becoming erratic. She posted cryptic messages on social media about people who use love like a ladder. The luxury bags disappeared. The condo's maintenance stopped. Camille, through backdoor channels, found out that Julian's business account had been frozen pending an audit. The ripple effect spread fast. He had over-leveraged properties, unpaid vendors, and one lawsuit from a subcontractor claiming fraud. Camille simply watched, sipping tea in the apartment she paid for with freelance design contracts she picked up under a pseudonym. Then came the day Julian tried to reach her directly. He showed up at her sister's house, all smiles and nerves. Nora answered the door with a raised brow. Camille was inside, watching from the hallway. She didn't step out. Julian stood there saying he just wanted to talk, clear the air, maybe get lunch. Nora told him Camille wasn't available. She watched his eyes dart around, searching for something, guilt, maybe, or reassurance that she still missed him. But Camille had changed. She wasn't soft anymore. She was still like water before a tidal wave. Later that week, Camille sent him an invitation. A simple, elegant note delivered to his office. It read, "Let's talk. Just us. Dinner at Vodome. 8 p.m. No lawyers yet. You owe me that much." He showed up looking victorious, like a man who believed she wanted closure or maybe a second chance. Camille wore black. Not mourning. Command. She had a folder in her hand. He smiled and said, "Cam, you look great." She didn't smile back. She placed the folder on the table and slid it toward him. Inside were copies of forged documents, property transfers in her name, wire records to offshore accounts, and screenshots of shell companies tied to Julian's signature. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His confidence drained like a punctured balloon. Camille poured herself a glass of wine and said, "You made it legal. Now I will too." Julian stammered, asking what she wanted. She didn't answer. She stood up, left the folder, and walked away. He called her name once. She didn't turn. Outside the restaurant she finally smiled. Not because it was over, but because it had just begun. The headlines didn't mention Camille by name, but she recognized herself between every line. Prominent real estate investor under audit for fraudulent business practices. Whistleblower lawsuit freezes assets across 3 states. Mystery tipster triggers collapse of high-span properties. Camille read them while sipping tea in her studio apartment, her phone on silent, her laptop filled with court documents and statements ready to be filed at just the right moment. Julian's face hadn't appeared in the photos yet, but it was only a matter of time. She had anticipated every step of the collapse, mapped it like a puzzle, and each piece was snapping perfectly into place. Julian didn't go down quietly. He called her again and again, leaving voicemails filled with half-hearted apologies, manipulative memories, and fake vulnerability. "Camille, I miss you. We made mistakes, but we can fix it. You were always the smart one. I should have listened more. Gigi's gone. She wasn't what I thought. None of this is worth it without you." Camille listened once. Not because she believed him, but because it reminded her how easily he turned lies into lullabies. Every word he spoke now had the sound of a man gasping underwater. He still didn't understand. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was about reckoning. Gigi disappeared first. She left a note at Julian's office saying she didn't sign up for lawsuits, IRS visits, and anonymous letters threatening to expose her to her influencer sponsors. She took the Porsche, which wasn't even in Julian's name anymore, and left town. Camille had ensured that Gigi's tax filings were forwarded to an eager investigative reporter. When the article came out about luxury influencers hiding income, Camille knew Gigi would stay buried under the weight of public shame. Julian, however, stayed in place like a man watching his mansion burn, too stunned to run. Camille's lawyer filed civil charges quietly. She wasn't seeking prison time, just asset return, damages for fraud, emotional manipulation, and breach of contract. The paper trail was airtight. Julian tried to settle. He offered her 2 properties and shares in a company he no longer controlled. She declined. She didn't want the leftovers from a crumbling kingdom. She wanted the walls pulled down stone by stone. The moment Julian realized she wouldn't take his bribes was the moment his voice changed. Gone was the charm, and came the desperation. He showed up one day at her new art studio, small, tucked into a corner building, smelling of paint and dust. He pounded on the glass until her assistant called the police. From behind the security mirror, Camille watched him scream her name. His hair was disheveled, his voice cracking, his eyes red. She didn't feel pity. She didn't feel triumph either. Just silence. When the officers escorted him away, she returned to her canvas. It was half finished, a black silhouette standing in fire, paint strokes heavy and layered. She titled it Rescue. Not because she was saved, because she had saved herself. Julian's empire collapsed faster than she predicted. Once the IRS came in, so did the investors, the board members, the banks. The properties he had over-leveraged began foreclosure proceedings. One of his subcontractors posted a viral video explaining how Julian forged invoices to avoid payments. The public loved a downfall, especially when the man wore suits and the woman left behind wore strength. She received a letter from a female entrepreneurs fund offering to sponsor her next exhibition. Camille didn't reply immediately. She was still measuring what she wanted to do with her name now that it was hers again. The court awarded her a large sum, enough to rebuild everything twice over. Camille donated half to a nonprofit supporting women manipulated out of business ownership and property rights. The other half she used to buy back the property Julian had once tried to bribe her with. Not to live in. To sell at a premium, clean and fair. She never even stepped inside it. Some things she knew weren't meant to be returned to. They were meant to be buried. One morning, weeks later, she stood on the balcony of her sister's home, watching the sun stretch over the rooftops. Nora joined her, coffee in hand, giving her a look that said everything. "You could have ruined him louder," Nora whispered. Camille smiled faintly. "I didn't want volume. I wanted permanence. And she got it." Julian wasn't in prison. He was free. But broke. Blacklisted. Alone. His reputation was ruined in the circles that once adored him. Every time he looked at his own name online, he'd see shadows of her fingerprints. He'd try to rebuild and no one would fund him. No one would trust him. And the worst part? He would always wonder how she did it. Camille didn't write a book. She didn't go on podcasts or TV. She painted. Her exhibit, the Exit series, opened a month later. Each painting was a different interpretation of liberation. Some quiet, some violent, some abstract. Critics called it raw, haunting, and masterful. People whispered that she had lived the story behind the strokes. She never confirmed or denied anything. When someone asked her about the woman in red standing at the edge of a cliff in one piece, Camille just said, "She survived." That was enough. Julian tried to contact her once more. A handwritten letter arrived without return information. It was long, self-pitying, blaming the world, the economy, Gigi, even Camille's cold heart. The final line read, "I don't know who you became, but I miss who you were." Camille read it once, then fed it to the fire pit behind her studio. The flame hissed, then went silent. She returned to her easel and dipped her brush in gold. She booked a one-way ticket to Lisbon weeks later, using her maiden name. She told no one except Nora. On the plane, she looked out the window and watched the clouds float like islands of memory. She thought about how Julian once said she was too gentle to ever win in a cruel world. He was wrong. The world wasn't cruel. It just didn't hand kindness a sword. Camille had forged her own. As the plane touched down, her phone vibrated with an email from the Lisbon Art Conservatory. They wanted to feature her work in a permanent installation on female reinvention. The subject line read, "You turned betrayal into legacy." Camille stepped into the Portuguese sun, a new woman. Not reborn from pain, but rebuilt by her own hands. This time no one could take it away. Not with tricks, papers, lies, or kisses. She was hers now. Entirely. Finally.